And now for Suleman's much anticipated await for years and years, his speech.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So, mashallah, I'm glad that I can finally share my story. This is something I wanted to talk about at the very first conference after I became a submitter, which was the 19th annual conference, but I wasn't able to attend the conference. But my story sort of talks about all of that. So without any further delay, I'm just going to start and share my story. It's kind of long. I've kind of wanted to talk about it, but I always felt like I am kind of a private person. I didn't want to let people into my very private sort of life, but in a way. But I mean, mashallah, I think like what people think about us, as long as we're doing the right thing and we're faithful to God and we're sincere, and things, whatever happens in the past before becoming a submitter is behind us. So I'm sure people outside of this gathering right here are probably also going to hear the speech. So it is, I think, a little bit of killing the ego when you're able to talk about yourself in this. You know what I mean, anyways. So it was the summer of 2002, and one afternoon I was sitting by myself in an area, very secluded area, and I was just relaxing. Won't say what I was doing, but anyways, so I was just relaxing and just taking the time to just separate myself from the world. And a tiny insect started crawling over my leg. And I started to reflect at that point. For some reason, my entire focus went on to the insects, and I couldn't think of anything else but that insect at the time. It completely took over my mind. And I started thinking about how amazing this creation is. It's such a sophisticated design. And if we were to manufacture anything like that ourselves, with it being so smart, if I put my hand in front of it, it's going to change its direction. If I put it in the other way, it's going to calculate its point. And it's all self-sufficient. It's not being run by some battery or anything like that. It's completely self-sufficient, and this is how God created it. So it completely blew up my mind at the time. And as I did that, I slowly began to look around, the grass around me, and I think I was wearing shorts, so I started looking at the hair on my body, and then the grass and things. By the time I was done, looking around myself and looking at the view around me, it just was amazing. I had this strong feeling that God was controlling everything and that He was here, mashallah. And I think that was the point in life where it was a turning point where I just woke up and I realized that I was just probably in a different world, I was asleep. And this reminds me of verse 3:191, where God says, "They remember God while sitting in their sides, and they reflect upon the creation of the heavens and the earth. Our Lord, you did not create all this in vain. Be you glorified. Save us from the retribution of hell." So it was a really weird time for me. I had gotten, even though I was a computer science graduate, there wasn't much to do for a computer science professional at the time. And so there was an FM radio station that was just opening up, and they had a lineup of English pop songs. And I just responded to an ad on the radio, and they needed, some DJs. So I was like, yeah, I'll probably give it a try. And so I went up there and started, we started doing our test transmission and stuff. And for some reason, during that time, what my mom gave me, I saw somebody gave her a book about God's attributes. And they were in Arabic, and then they were translated in English. And as I started reading them, I really began to understand like who God is, and it was just really amazing for me. So when I started working at the radio station, I had this thought, even though it's not really legal or anything, but I think this was all planned by God. But so I had this weird thought in my head that for some reason, while I'm working there, I can just make a song and just play it on the radio while I'm doing that. And so I thought of that book that someone gave to my mother with God's attributes, and I asked her for it. Normally, I wouldn't ask. I'm not the kind of person like who would like tell my parents to go do this for me or that for me. Like I'll go do it myself. But I asked her specifically. I said to grab me the book, and what she brought was a different book that looked nothing like it. It wasn't God's attributes. It was a small booklet written by somebody in Pakistan, and it was just about the mathematical miracle, just the basic facts. I don't think it even mentioned anything about God's messenger of the covenant at the time. And I just read through the facts, and it was I got goosebumps because it was a point of realization for me to understand that everything about the hereafter, that we hear about, I mean, heaven and hell, all of these things are a physical fact. And I think that really stood up, that really changed my life in the sense that I knew for a fact now that, God exists. I knew Quran was the truth from God, but I didn't really understand anything about the message at the time. So I kind of went with it, and it was a point for me, though, that when I saw the miracle, it was like, I'm watching Moses, turn the staff into a serpent. And basically, the discovery marked the beginning of an era in religion where we don't need any sort of where we have for the first time we have the physical, tangible evidence that God exists. And I was just like super excited when I saw this, and I was like, this is completely unbelievable. I said, how come nobody knows about it? And I was like, why is the world still going where it's going? And I was just completely surprised. So I was like, okay, my first reaction was I should build a website about it and let everybody in the world know. And so, but I was like, well, maybe let me just check if there's anything already available on this. And so then I looked up online and I found the website. But due to my own shortcomings, I wasn't able to grasp the whole truth and my understanding of the miracle, and I fell into this argument with one of the prominent websites at the time. I guess for those of you, this was in 2004, so you know which website I'm referring to. So I got into an argument with this lady, and then because I started verifying everything from the messenger, and then she told me that this is what the translation meant in Arabic, and then I looked at my other translation and I was a little bit confused, and I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then she said something harsh back, and then I told her, I said, you guys are following Satan. And then she lashed back at me, and then I was like, these people are completely misguided. There's no way that anybody would talk like that if they were from God. So that repelled me, I believe, for almost a whole year. But that year was actually probably like the worst year of my life ever, because what happened was, so after I disregarded the message, my parents actually went on for a Hajj. It's funny, Ron gave this sermon, but when you go for Hajj, they actually give you they have the translation of Quran in every language from the printing complex from King Fahad at Hajj, the Saudi royal family. So they had one in Urdu, in my language, and so my parents brought that with them, and I was really trying to learn about God. So every day I would go and I would start reading, but as we all know, we're blessed with the right translation of Quran, mashallah. But the translation I read was written by the Saudis. And so, like, it talks about like you read a verse and then there's like a lot of stuff in the parentheses and they have like explanations, and so like to cut the long story short, by the time I was done halfway, not even halfway, I think I was it's probably like maybe quarter of the Quran. Like I was ready to just go and do something because there was just so much hatred involved in that talks about like Jews, Christians, disbelievers, all of that. And I mean, I just really wanted to learn, but obviously, when I rejected the message, there was no way I was going to be guided. So I went to talk to some people, and one person led me to another, and next thing I know, like I found myself in this training facility. I was only there for 3 days. I wasn't planning on coming back, but I happened to call one of my friends, and caller's ID was very caller's ID was very new at the time, and he was the only friend who had caller's ID. And instead of calling my parents directly, I thought if I called him, that I would be able to like contain myself, because if I talk to my parents, I'll probably be emotionally moved and I'll come back. And I didn't want that. I just wanted to dedicate my life and be a striver and all that. So I called my friend, and I forgot he was the only person who had caller's ID. So I called from like a public calling place. So then, right after I finished the call, I told my friend, I mean, I left the house, and I'm not coming back. And he was like, "Where are you? Tell me." And I'm like, "No, I can't tell you," and this and that. So right after I left, he called the place back. The guy answered the phone. So he's like, "I know where this place is at." They said, "Okay, we'll come tomorrow. Just take us there." And I found out later, anyways. So then I went back to the training facility, and it was a fun time. Like I didn't do anything. I didn't like use any weapons or anything like that. Just in case anybody's curious, I didn't do any of those. But what it was like they were just like, it was more like an orientation where like they just talk about like what it means to be a jihadist and all that. But what happened was finally so they really had it's a thing that they do on purpose. So what they do is they give you really bad food. It's going to be rotten. The water is going to be really polluted. And I think like one of the reasons why they do that, it's not because they're poorly funded. They're very well funded, but they do it so that people just get sick of life, and there's nothing to do for people. And so this is a motivating factor for people. When they talk about paradise and all that stuff, you'll have virgins and all that. So you really just have a miserable life, and then this idea of the hereafter is more appealing to you. That's my theory on it, but I could be wrong. Maybe they just didn't have the funds where I went. But mashallah, I went there, and the first thing I did was, I was thirsty, and I looked at the water. I was like, I would rather just die of thirst. I said, I'm never going to drink this water, because it was literally just brown. But then the first day, within the third day, they had finally some of the guests get up and help them out, and they had these. We were in the middle of this forest, and they had these giant logs. Timber logs that they were cutting down the forest and using the trees, probably using that to make money. And so they had all the people carry those. And then after that, I was so tired, like I had like 6 glasses of water, like one after another. And I mean, I got really tired. So that was the time when I was like, I just probably need some rest. We were like tenting in the middle of the forest. So I went into my tent, and I just lied down over there. And then all of a sudden, like a tiny little ant, like I felt like a tiny ant was in my clothes, and it was like crawling over me or my back. And then suddenly the ant bit me, and it was really weird, because I felt that the ant was like trying to communicate with me, and it was telling me that I should get out of my tent. Mashallah. So I walk out of my tent, and I see my dad and 2 of my best friends from school, from like my circle of friends. One of them was my childhood friend and another friend, and then they were just all walking towards me. And if I wanted to at the time, I could just hide, go back in, but I didn't. And I see them talking, and they were telling my dad that I wasn't there. They're supposed to be like, so-called Muslims, and they were lying to my dad saying I wasn't there. But they insisted that they were going to keep looking, and I see them walking towards me, and I just couldn't move. So long story short, they got me. I went back. I was still not convinced whether it was the right thing to do or not. Then my dad started telling me that I should be more peaceful and this and that. So then I went into like looking at the Sufis, and was there. After a while, like I realized, the guys were like all after money. Like, I went. I really respected the person. I went to him for like asking him for like. Giving me insight and things like that, like mystical stuff. And like here, I see him like talking to a guy. One guy was telling the Sufi person like about how he can't have kids, and he was like, well, if you don't have any money, there's nothing I can do. Everything I do costs money. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, like, there's something wrong with this picture, but I can't really tell what it is because I wasn't guided. But anyways, I got sick of it after a while, and then I went to like the missionary group that they go from door to door, kind of like the Mormons, except worse. They're more pushy in a lot of ways. And finally, like it got to a point where I started getting depressed. I grew like a long beard. I looked really. I felt it was really ugly. I had no friends. Thank God I have no pictures to haunt me, except the one party we had where it was a costume party, and that was ours. But mashallah, it just somewhat reminds me of what I could have looked like right now if I didn't have the message, and for that I'm very appreciative. Praise God. So I was thrilled to finally have discovered the truth. I started listening to music. I started watching TV. I started, dressing normal. Mashallah. It was interesting because what happened was through all this time when I was at my lowest, finally what happened was one of my friends who I knew back at my school, I used to tell him about the mathematical miracle all the time. So he started chatting with me. He's like, "Do you still believe in the mathematical miracle?" And I just had this flashback, and I was like, well, I thought about all the basic facts, all the physical facts, and I was like, there's no way I can deny those. These are physical facts. And I was like, well, maybe my life is so bad because I made the wrong decision, mashallah. So God allowed me to go back and revisit my position on those. That's after that I started to, come back. It took off. Started listening to music, started watching TV, shaved off my beard, started dressing normal, and mashallah. At that time it was horrible. Like I couldn't even get a job. I was so depressed, and I started taking medication, and I just couldn't function. So after I became a sabir, mashallah, sorry. So God allowed me to revisit and the mathematical miracle, and mashallah, it changed my life. But it didn't stop there. It was the 19th annual conference, and I wanted to be with my family. That's embarrassing. So I wrote back to Abdullah at the time, and I told him I wanted to attend the conference, and he sent me an invite. my parents actually hid the invite because they probably also knew that there was no hope that I was actually going to be able to even come to the U.S. because prior to this, I mean, prior to going through all of this, like I was becoming a pilot. I had a pilot's license, and then 9/11 happened. And when I went to the training facility, I actually left my ID. I lost it and never took it back. So there was like everybody was like laughing at me like, "There's no way you're gonna get it." And mashallah, I was convinced that it was God's plan. And I prayed to God, and I went to the embassy. And for some reason, the person I met at the window got really overly enthusiastic about my background, and the fact that I was a web developer, and I did websites and things like that. And so he was like, "Is that the address, email address on your application? Is that a valid email address?" And I was like, "Yes." So he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna send you an email." And it was very unusual. Like he had his visiting card in his pocket, and he just gave it to me, and he emailed me and wanted to hang out, which is really unusual. Like in Pakistan, like a U.S. consulate guy wants to hang out with you, and I was like, "Okay." And so, mashallah, I went there, and I mean, long story short, we became friends. The day I happened to go there to apply for my visa was the 19th of July. 19th of June, and then almost 2 months later, like we were friends now, sort of, and so it was a Sunday. There was no way like somebody could hand me my passport on a Sunday. It comes to the courier on a business day, and he gave it to me. It was the 19th of August, exactly 2 months later. I looked at my passport the day my visa was stamped. It was actually the 17th of August, and that was a multiple of 19, put side by side. And mashallah, but it was great. And so he told me that he handed me the passport, and then he asked me like, can you tell me like what's a person of your caliber, how much they make right now in your country, So I was like, I gave him a number, so he just doubled it literally, and he said, "Okay, we'll pay you this much. Would you like to work for us?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." It's like, you can't tell people about your work, your nature of your job, but like you can work for us. And it was mostly like going to work as a spy. So so I was recruited by, I can't really tell if it was the CIA directly or if it was the State Department, but I was told it was the State Department, and which the CIA works for the State Department. And so I started traveling to like all the remote villages in Pakistan, like all the dangerous areas. Just a local guy. I would go to internet cafes. It was actually nice. I mean, because I was just traveling all the time, just at my own. I had my own hours, mashallah. But slowly, like I started to feel like things were changing. I didn't realize when I told people. I was so excited that I had a job that I told people I was working for the U.S. Embassy, which is acceptable. But the problem was the U.S. Embassy only exists in one certain city, which is Islamabad, the capital. But I was going to I was everywhere. I was going everywhere. So people, and I had ties with like these traditional Muslims while I was, going through all my stuff. So, and I shaved off my beard, and they were like, "What's going on?" And like I started telling them I'm working for the embassy, and then I started telling them about the miracle. And just like things started piling up, and one time, like one of the guys, he was kind of like very extremist. Like he told me that I should stop, and I started getting some threats and all that. And I became paranoid at the time, and I just told him I was going to quit. And I was told basically that I shouldn't worry. Because what I found out was the intelligence agency that was responsible for mobilizing the Taliban in Afghanistan was like the military agency from Pakistan called the ISI, and which was so I told them that I strongly believe that they knew where I was and what I was doing, and they told me it's nothing to worry about because they said those guys work for us, and. And that's when I really started freaking out, because what I thought to myself was like, okay, so I'm helping these guys. These guys are the good guys, and they're preventing all the terrorism. You know, they're preventing people from blowing up themselves. And I thought about the verse where God says, you know, that saving one life is like saving whole humanity. And now He's telling me they work for them. So it just was like the final straw for me. And mashallah, I had the visa at the time, mashallah. And what I did was I just told them I'm gonna quit, and they said, "Well, you can go for a vacation if you want. I see that this is very stressful, and if you don't come back in 2 weeks, we have a meeting in next month. And if you don't come back, we're gonna call the FBI and have you escort you back to the plane and cancel your visa." And for a while, like I went along with it. I was like, okay. And then, mashallah, when what I did was I just got my tickets. I went to the travel agent. I told him just get me the cheapest flight, and I didn't care like what the route was and everything. And mashallah, I ended up being on the flight that landed in the U.S. It was flight number 19 for Continental Airlines. They have a flight that goes from Heathrow. It flies every day and flies into New Jersey. And mashallah, I was flight number 19. And mashallah, I ended up coming here. Then slowly I met with all the submitters. And I mean, what I learned from this, mashallah, is everything that God has. I mean, He has a specific plan for all of us. And each one of us, if we really went around to think about our story and how we came to submission, God has it all written down. I mean, if any of us wanted to do any of this, we could never do it. So, mashallah, God is the best planner. Any questions? Thank you. I'm not working for the CIA. Yes, mashallah, I realize, do not spy, please. Okay? All right, spying is prohibited. Mashallah. Anything else?
That answers a lot of questions, Suleman. That was amazing.